"What the hell are you doing to my son?" Maya Williams, the woman he hired to care for his home, is holding his infant son Bryce in her arms. But it's not a normal embrace. She is breastfeeding the baby. Her blouse is unbuttoned just enough for the tiny baby to latch on his soft body, relaxed in her arms. Her eyes are closed, her mouth humming a gentle tune as if this is the most natural and sacred moment in the world. Arthur's heart seems to stop. His entire world, a world built on control and order, suddenly crumbles. The shock quickly turns into an explosive rage. "What are you doing to my son?" he roars, his voice tearing through the room's peace. He lunges in each step, a hammer blow against the false serenity. Maya startles her eyes wide with shock. Her body tenses, her instincts telling her to protect the child in her arms, but she doesn't react. She gently, slowly unlatches Bryce from her breast, then soothes the baby who is stirring slightly. "Mr. Moore, please let me explain," she says, her voice trembling like a thread about to snap. But her words are buried under his storm of anger. "You think you can touch my son? What the hell are you doing breastfeeding him like some damn wet nurse?" Arthur yells, his voice cracking with indignation and suspicion. "This is my son who gave you the right." Maya stands up, her arms still holding the tiny baby tight. Her heart is breaking, but her mind tells her to be strong. "I didn't mean to. The baby hasn't been eating for several days. He refuses formula and is getting weaker." She takes a breath, her voice becoming more resolute. "I used to be a neonatal nurse, and I still have milk. He latched on. He needed it." "Shut up!" Arthur roars, his hands clenched into fists. He doesn't want to listen, can't listen. He only sees a strange woman taking what is most precious from him. "I just did what I thought was right." Maya continues, her voice now filled with determination. "He was starving, Mr. Moore. He stopped crying, stopped squirming. I couldn't stand by and watch a child waste away." Arthur moves closer, his eyes threatening to incinerate her. "You've crossed a line." He hisses each word like a dagger. "You don't get to touch what belongs to me. You don't have the right to make decisions for my family." And then, without warning, a slap lands. It's not a slap of mere anger. It's a slap of indignation, of control, and of an invisible fear. Maya stumbles, but her arms around Bryce don't loosen. The room sinks into a chilling silence. Only the baby's hurried breaths and the terrifying stillness remain. Maya raises a hand to her cheek, but she doesn't cry. She just looks at Arthur, her eyes wide, full of shock and hurt. Then she turns, shielding the child. "How dare you?" she whispers, but its weight is enough to make Arthur pause. "I saved your son." Arthur's chest heaves, his hand still hovering in the air, as if he himself can't believe his own action. "I don't need saving from your kind." He spits out, the venomous words pouring from a deep hatred. "My kind," Maya repeats, her voice sharp as steel. "You mean black, poor, a woman?" The question is a dagger straight into his arrogance. Arthur freezes, speechless. "I lost my son 3 months ago." Maya continues, her eyes blazing but tearless. "I held him in my arms when he passed away. I know what it feels like to be helpless, to watch a tiny life leave while you just stand there, unable to do anything." She takes a deep breath. "Yesterday I saw that look in Bryce's eyes, and I did what a mother would do. I acted." Arthur turns his back, running a hand through his hair, his confidence melting like ice under the sun. Maya gently places Bryce in his crib. The baby stirs slightly, then falls into a peaceful sleep, his belly full. "I'm going to get my things," she says softly, then turns and walks away. Arthur cannot stop her. His hands tremble at his sides, as if they can still feel the disgust of his own actions. The long hallway is like a tunnel. Maya's heart pounds with every step. Her cheek throbs, but the physical pain is nothing compared to the humiliation gnawing at her soul. She feels erased, reduced to something unworthy of respect, not to be treated as a human. She wonders, was the slap more painful than that look of hatred? That look treated her like a thief, a trespasser, even though she acted with a mother's heart. Another maid looks up, her eyes full of curiosity and fear, but Maya says nothing. She just walks straight to her room, the cramped and drab room. She collapses onto the bed, exhaling the breath she had been holding for so long. Her bag, only half packed, lies in a corner. Maybe she should have left a long time ago. She looks down at her hands, feeling the weight of Bryce, a feeling so familiar that her heart aches. Her chest still remembers the baby's need, and somewhere beneath the layers of shame and anger, She has no regrets. Upstairs, Arthur slumps into an armchair. He looks down at his sleeping son, who for the first time in days looks so peaceful. No more tightly clenched fists, no more gasping cries, just the tranquil face of a satisfied child. Arthur is pale, his hands trembling. He looks at them. The hands that once held his beloved wife, that soothed her through postpartum nights, now struck the only woman who had made his son stop crying. Suddenly, Arthur Moore, a powerful CEO, a successful billionaire, a widower, feels incredibly small. Bryce stirs slightly. Arthur looks toward the door where Maya had just left and whispers to himself, "What have I done?" Maya sits on the edge of the narrow bed. The cracked mirror reflects her face, her cheeks swollen. The physical pain is nothing compared to the humiliation. She had witnessed many terrible things in her life, but she never imagined she would be hit for saving a child. The Seattle sky outside has turned gray, a gray that weighs heavily on her chest. She looks down at her hands. They still hold the warmth of Bryce. She hadn't felt such closeness since her own son Elijah died. A gentle, hesitant knock, not a forceful one, pulls her from her thoughts. She carefully opens the door. Eleanor Moore stands there in a crimson robe, her gray hair neatly tied back her face, unreadable. In her hands is a steaming cup of hot tea. Eleanor asks, her voice even more of an offer than a question. Maya steps back, making way. "Of course, ma'am." Eleanor enters without waiting for an invitation and sits in the room's only chair, placing the steaming cup of tea on the table. Her sharp eyes scan the simple room, which is clean but bare with no personal touches. "I was told what happened," she says, her voice still calm. "I assume he told you," Maya replies, her voice restrained, a hint of bitterness in it. "No. The housekeeper heard the shouting. I had to ask." Eleanor leans forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "I saw the look in your eyes last week. The way you held Bryce. You knew something was wrong before any of us did." Maya takes a breath, looking down at her hands. "I used to work in the neonatal ward. I've seen that kind of hunger before. Exhausted babies. They stop crying when they're too weak." Eleanor nods slowly. "Arthur is grieving, but that doesn't excuse what he did." "No, it doesn't," Maya agrees, and a moment of silence falls between the two women. A strange current flows between them. Not empathy, but a deep understanding, an invisible thread connecting two generations. Two mothers. You could sue. Eleanor says the words so sudden they make Maya look up with a start. "I won't do that," she says softly, the conviction in her voice making Eleanor look her straight in the eye. "He's broken. I know what that feels like." Eleanor sighs a weary sigh. "You're stronger than most." "I don't want to be—" Maya admits, her voice filled with a lifetime of exhaustion. "I just want to do what's right." Eleanor's eyes glance at the suitcase in the corner of the room. "Are you leaving?" "I think I should," Maya replies. "After what happened, it's clear I don't belong here." Eleanor stands up, walks to the door, her hand resting on the knob. "You saved my grandson. You didn't cross a line. You stepped into a place where we all failed." Then she turns to look directly at Maya, her sharp eyes showing a hint of something both strong and gentle. "If you leave, it should be your choice, not because a man lashed out in pain." She leaves, leaving Maya alone in the silence. Maya's heart pounds. A part of her wants to run, to pack everything and disappear, but deep inside, a small voice whispers, "Stay." That morning, Arthur Moore sits alone in his study. The weak early light streams through the dark mahogany bookshelves, the steady tick of the antique clock on the mantelpiece, counting down the seconds to his collapse. He hasn't slept. The image of the slap repeats in his mind, not a rational slap, but a primal, ugly reflex, an explosion of a lifetime of suppressed pain. He looks at his reflection in the wine cabinet. His face is pale, his features sharper and older than yesterday. The man looking back at him is not the Arthur Moore he once knew, but a stranger full of fear. A gentle chime sounds the intercom. "Mr. Moore," the housekeeper's voice says. "Mrs. Eleanor asked you to come to the conservatory." "She says it's urgent." Arthur sighs. "Tell her I'll be there." The conservatory is filled with natural light, a warm green space, a stark contrast to the coldness of the house. His mother stands near the large window, watching the rain drizzle on the glass. "You wanted to see me?" Arthur asks. Eleanor turns. "Sit down." Arthur obeys a habit from childhood. She doesn't beat around the bush, doesn't ask questions, but gets straight to the point. You hit her. Arthur closes his eyes. He doesn't want to hear it, doesn't want to face it. I didn't. I don't want to hear the reason. He looks up, meeting her eyes. I was scared, Mom. He whispers a painful confession. I walked in, and I saw my son safe, finally eating, finally resting, and yet I punished the woman who made that happen. She crossed a line. Arthur still tries to justify himself. She saved your son. Eleanor cuts him off. Arthur looks down at his hands, his fingers clenched. I didn't even know who she was. She was quiet, kept her distance. I never... Then it's time you found out? Eleanor says, her voice full of resolve. She lost a child. Arthur, she still has milk. She has experience training. She did what no one else in this house could do, including you. Arthur's throat tightens, a feeling of guilt and regret welling up. I was wrong? Then make it right. Eleanor says, her words a command. That evening, Maya walks into the laundry room, intending to return her uniform. Her contract was only a short-term, non-binding agreement. Another name on a list of maids who came and went. She doesn't expect a second chance. But when she opens the door, Arthur is there. He looks exhausted still, in his morning shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, tie loosened. His presence makes the room suddenly feel small. Maya begins. I know. Arthur says, his voice much lower. I wanted to see you before you left. She says nothing, crossing her arms over her chest, a subtle defensive posture. He looks down at the floor, then looks her straight in the eye. I'm sorry, he says, his voice surprisingly sincere. For what I said and did, I was angry. Not with you, but with myself, with everything I couldn't fix. I didn't do it to be thanked or pitied. I know, Arthur replies. I know you did it for Bryce, and because that's who you are. A long, heavy silence falls between them, but this time it's no longer a confrontation, but a beginning, an acknowledgement. I want to make amends. Arthur adds, his voice soft but weighted. I can't change what I did, but I don't want you to leave. Maya raises a surprised eyebrow. You want me to stay? He nods. As a caregiver, not a housekeeper. As someone we can trust. Maya looks at him intently, probing. It won't be easy. Important things never are. I won't take another slap, she says calmly. You shouldn't have had to take the first one. A silence falls between them again. Maya sighs, relaxing her shoulders. I'll stay for Bryce, but if you ever lay a hand on anyone like that again... I won't, Arthur says with conviction. I swear it. As she turns to walk away, she stops at the threshold. Mr. Moore, she calls. Yes, you're not the only one who lost something, but your son still has a chance. Then she leaves, her steps steady, her head held high. Arthur stands there watching her go. In that moment, he realizes he wasn't just asking a housekeeper to stay. He was asking a woman who understood the meaning of fighting for a child to stay. And maybe, just maybe, she would save more than one person. The next morning, Maya moves quietly through the house. The stinging on her cheek is now just a dull ache, like a reminder that will never fade. The atmosphere in the house is different, not lighter, but as if a new fragility has settled, as if something has subtly changed. She walks into the nursery just as the first rays of sun peek through the lace curtains. Bryce stirs in his crib, his small hands reaching up over his head. When he sees Maya, a sleepy smile twitches at the corner of his lips. A small gesture, but it warms her heart deeply. Good morning, little guy, she whispers, gently lifting him up. She sways him easily, softly, humming a lullaby. This time there is no hesitation. She touches him with certainty, with a clear purpose. Maya Williams, once a nurse, once a grieving mother, now stands here as a billionaire's son's unexpected protector. Downstairs, Arthur sits at the breakfast table, his untouched coffee growing cold. Eleanor sips her tea, her eyes scanning the morning paper. The tension between them is quiet, suppressed, but not invisible. She's staying, Eleanor says without looking up. Arthur nods. I know. She's doing it for Bryce, not for me. I know that too. Eleanor folds the paper, setting it aside. Don't waste a second chance, Arthur. Not with her, not with your son. If I've learned anything at 72, it's that pride doesn't hold a child overnight. People do. Arthur doesn't reply. His fingers tap on the porcelain cup. He built companies on logic, discipline, precision. But this role as a father is a chaos he had never calculated. By mid-afternoon, Maya notices the change. The other maids whisper more than usual. The housekeeper barely dares to meet her eyes. One of them, Grace, a young woman with a gentle face but a sharp tongue, looks her up and down with a twisted smile. "So," Grace says as they pass in the hallway, "you're the one who's breastfeeding the billionaire's baby." Maya stops. Her shoulders stiffen, but she doesn't turn around. "You know," Grace continues, her voice syrupy sweet, "I used to think you were just quiet, but now I get it. You're playing the long game. Get close to the baby, closer to the will. Smart." Maya slowly turns around. Her voice is calm, sharp as glass. "If I wanted money, Grace, I would have sued your boss for assault and owned this entire house by now." Grace's smile trembles on her lips. Maya leans close enough for her words to make her flinch. "I don't play games with children, and I don't compete with girls who gossip behind doors." Then she walks away, leaving Grace standing in stunned silence. But as she rounds the corner, a feeling stirs inside her. She had never considered how her role would be perceived by others in the house. The whispers, the glances, they weren't just about race or class. They were about fear. Maya had crossed an invisible boundary, and in doing so, she became a threat. That evening after dinner, Arthur approaches Maya in the hallway outside the nursery. He is dressed casually, no suit, no tie, just a simple shirt and dark pants. The sharp lines of his face seem softer in the warm light of the hallway. "Can I talk to you?" he asks. Maya crosses her arms. "You're talking." Arthur exhales. "I've invited a therapist to the house for Bryce. Maybe for me too." Maya raises an eyebrow. "That's a start. I also want to formalize your role, not just as a caregiver, but as a guardian when I'm away on business with full authority, medical decisions, emergency protocols, everything." Maya's expression stiffens slightly. "Why now?" "Because today, I saw how people look at you as if you don't belong here. But you do." Maya shakes her head. "Belonging isn't a piece of paper, Mr. Moore. It has to be earned." "I know. That's why I'm asking for your trust again." She looks at him for a moment. "I'll consider it, but not for you." "For Bryce?" Arthur asks, his voice a confession. He nods, swallowing the last of his pride. "For Bryce." That night, Maya stands alone in the mansion's backyard. The city lights flicker in the distance, but she doesn't look at them. She pulls her shawl tighter, closing her eyes. The silence is broken by soft footsteps. "I didn't expect anyone," she says without turning. Eleanor's voice is gentle from behind her. "You look like you need a reminder." "Of what?" Maya asks. "That you're not alone." Maya opens her eyes. "I don't feel that way. Every look, every whisper, it's as if I'm a danger just for existing." "You are," Eleanor says bluntly without a hint of compromise. "You are a black woman in a house built by white men with old money. You have stepped out of the position they assigned to you." "That scares them. So what do I do?" Maya asks, her voice strained. "You stand tall, you keep your wits about you, and you don't let them pull you down." Maya turns to her. "Even if things get worse?" Eleanor nods. "Especially when things get worse." That night, as the house falls silent, Maya checks on Bryce one last time. The baby sleeps peacefully, his arms spread like an angel's wings, a small snore puffing from his nose. She looks at him, her heart filled with a strange, aching feeling, half sadness, half purpose. She doesn't know what tomorrow will bring. She doesn't know how deep the whispers will cut. But she knows this. She's not going anywhere, not yet, not while this child still needs her, and not while the truth is still waiting to be revealed behind every glance, every whisper, every shadow. The next morning in the Moore house unfolds like a symphony. The whirring of the coffee maker, the rustling of newspapers, the steady tap of polished shoes on marble floors. But Maya, now Bryce's full-time caregiver, has learned to move in silence. Her world is now attuned to the rhythm of a child's, needs not the rituals of wealth. Bryce giggles from his playpen in the conservatory, his tiny fingers clutching a cloth giraffe. Maya watches him with a quiet smile, kneeling beside him, a soft cloth in one hand, a bottle in the other. He is healthier now, more radiant. His once tired eyes now follow her every move. "Good morning, little sunshine," she whispers, stroking his curly hair. The sliding glass door behind her opens with a soft hiss. Arthur enters holding a tablet. He stops at the threshold, looking at his son with a mixture of wonder and regret. Bryce squeals when he sees him and reaches out. Arthur walks across the room, kneels and lifts the baby up with both hands. "Hey, buddy, did you sleep well?" Bryce babbles happily, his chubby hand patting Arthur's collar. Maya stands up slowly, watching them. "He's gaining weight," she notes. "He's eating more regularly." Arthur nods. "That's because of you. Thank you." Maya just gives a small nod, then turns to tidy up the scattered toys on the floor. She doesn't need praise. She needs stability, safety, and answers. "Listen," Arthur says as Bryce coos softly in his arms. "I want to show you something." After his nap, she looks at him cautiously. "Show me what—" Arthur hesitates. "Something I should have looked at a long time ago." 3 hours later, when Bryce is in a deep sleep, Maya follows Arthur down a long, dim hallway lined with dusty portraits. He leads her into his late wife Claire's private study, a room untouched since her death. The room is filled with warmth. Golden curtains, old books, photos capturing family moments frozen in time. Arthur walks to a far cabinet and unlocks it with a brass key. He takes out a thick black leather-bound journal filled with receipts, letters, and handwritten notes. "This was Claire's," he says, placing it on the desk. "She documented everything. Every donation, every check, every job application for a caregiver. She was meticulous." Maya walks over slowly. "Why are you showing me this?" Arthur flips to a marked page. "Because 2 days before she passed away, she wrote your name." "What?" Maya's stunned. Arthur nods. "I didn't even know she had met you." Maya takes a breath. "I never met her formally. I applied for a nursing job through a referral service. They said the family had chosen someone else. I was never called back." Arthur points to a piece of paper faded with time. "Maya Williams. Calm eyes. Claire's pain could be the one." He looks up. "She saw something in you. And now I wonder if she saw something I didn't." Maya gently traces her finger over the page. "She must have interviewed me when I took Elijah to the clinic." Arthur frowns. "Your son—" Maya nods. "He was sick. I didn't have insurance. A woman came to the waiting room. She sat next to me talking to Elijah, asking about my life. She never introduced herself." Arthur slumps into the leather chair behind his desk. His voice is low, filled with emotion. "That was Claire. She used to do things like that. Hidden kindness, anonymous charity." A heavy silence fills the room as they both try to connect the invisible threads that now stretch back into the past. Then Maya asks, her voice probing, "Why now?" Arthur gently closes the journal. "Because I think Claire was trying to tell me something about you, about who should have been here all along." That night, as Maya prepares Bryce's bottle for bedtime, she feels a new weight on her chest. Claire had chosen her. Even in silence, even in death, this woman had tried to build a bridge. She thinks about Grace's hostile tone, the cold looks from the staff, the slap that still echoes in her bones. And she tells herself, "No one gets to rewrite my place here." Later, while checking on Bryce, Maya discovers something strange, an old toy dice with the letters EM carved into the wood. It's different from the other toys in the room, worn hand-painted, clearly once loved. She brings it downstairs to the housekeeper, Mr. Halford, a thin man in his 60s with a rigid face and all-seeing eyes. "Do you know who this belongs to?" she asks. Halford takes the dice, his eyes narrowing. "Edward's. Arthur's brother." Maya blinks. "Arthur has a brother. He did—" Halford corrects, his voice lowered. "Edward passed away when he was 6, drowned in the pond on the grounds. A tragedy." "I don't see a grave," she says, tilting her head. "There's no grave," Halford says. "The family hushed it up. His mother never forgave herself. Claire never mentioned it." Maya's instincts flare, the dice, the name, the missing chapter. Did Claire ever go near that pond? Halford hesitates. Sometimes she'd walk out there alone, just stand and look. Maya stares at the dice in her hand. There are ghosts in this house, and not all of them are in the past. That night, as thunder rumbles in the distance, Maya writes in a journal under the light of a small desk lamp. "Claire knew about me, about something else, something deeper. Bryce isn't just a child caught in grief. He's the key to a legacy full of secrets." She pauses, tapping the pen. "And this house, this family, they aren't just mourning the dead, they're hiding them." She closes the journal, puts it in a drawer, and locks it. Tomorrow she will go to the pond alone, because sometimes the truth doesn't knock on the door. Sometimes it whispers beneath the water in the walls of this golden prison. At dawn, as the mansion is still asleep and the sky glows a pale yellow above the treetops, Maya slips out through the kitchen door. She wears a thick sweater and sturdy shoes. The dice with the letters EM is tucked into her pocket. A thin mist curls on the grass, covering the grounds in an eerie stillness. The pond is past the fence through the orchard, hidden behind a curtain of wild roses and birch trees. It is not on the mansion's blueprints. It is not visited on garden tours. But it is there, dark and forgotten. She finds it easily. It sits in a shallow depression, the water black and still. A rotting bench leans near the bank, half submerged in the mossy soil. Dragonflies flit across the water's surface, their wings shimmering like stained glass. Maya stands at the edge of the pond, her heart pounding, her eyes scanning the placid water. It doesn't look like a place where a child drowned. It looks like it's waiting. She takes the dice from her pocket. The wood is smooth from decades of handling. She turns it in her hand, then looks toward the birch trees. "Claire," she whispers, "why did you lead me here?" The wind changes, carrying the soft creak of the old bench. Maya sits down slowly, letting her eyes sweep across the pond's surface. The silence here is not peaceful. It is heavy watching, holding its breath. Then she notices the stones beneath the water. Near the center of the pond, something geometric glints. Maya walks closer, cautiously squinting. It looks like a foundation, a square structure submerged just below the murky surface. She kneels at the water's edge, her fingers touching the damp moss. This wasn't an accident. Someone built something here long ago, and then, intentionally, it was submerged. She stands up restless. As she turns away, her foot trips on something hard. She looks down and lightly kicks at the soil. A piece of stone is revealed. She kneels, wiping it clean with her sleeve. It is a tombstone. The inscription is faint, almost erased by time and rain. Edward Moore, beloved son, 1972-1978. Maya's breath catches. The grave is here hidden solitary. Suddenly, everything becomes clear. The secrecy, the whispers, Eleanor's anguish, Arthur's silence. This child, Arthur's brother, didn't just drown. He was erased from memory and existence. Back at the house, Maya moves quickly through the back corridors. She's not sure what she's looking for, but something is compelling her, pushing her forward. The dice is still in her jacket pocket, like a talisman warm from her palm. In the library, she finds an old family photo album wedged between two forgotten encyclopedias. She flips through pages of staged photos, birthdays, weddings, corporate parties. But Edward appears only once as a baby in Claire's arms, once standing next to Arthur. Then, nothing. She frowns. Even in the wealthiest families, children aren't just erased from memory. She's still turning the pages when Eleanor quietly enters behind her. "You found him," the older woman says softly. Maya starts turning around. "The grave." Eleanor continues, her eyes distant. "You went to the pond." Maya nods slowly, closing the album. "Why was he buried there?" Eleanor sighs, walking to the window. "Because my husband believed that weakness should be hidden. Edward was not like other boys. He was fragile, sensitive. Back then, there were whispers about his behavior, his voice, his tendencies. Words like defective were used. My husband couldn't bear it." Maya's chest tightens. "So he was hidden?" "Yes." Eleanor says, her voice crisp like a confession. "Claire fought for him, but by then the silence had taken root. And when he drowned, we buried him in shame." Maya's jaw tightens. "That wasn't his shame." "No," Eleanor agrees. "It was ours, and it haunts this house." They stand in silence for a long time. "Claire used to sit by the pond every morning," Eleanor finally says. "She called it penance." Maya takes a breath. "She left the dice." Eleanor nods. "And you found it." That evening, Arthur stands in the nursery watching Maya feed Bryce. Her hands move instinctively, her voice low and gentle. The baby's eyelids flutter with sleep. The room exudes a peace that Arthur hasn't felt since Claire passed away. "I owe you the truth," he says suddenly. Maya looks up. "About Edward, about everything." "I already know," she replies. "Or enough to understand." Arthur exhales. "When I was a child, I used to sneak out to see him. My father forbade it. But Edward, he was kind. He taught me to fold paper cranes. He would hum lullabies. He was a light in a very dark house. He looks down, his voice catching. And when he died, no one mourned him properly. They just buried the memory. Maya nods. Claire tried. She left breadcrumbs. Arthur looks her in the eye. And you followed them. Another silence. Then Maya says softly, Bryce deserves better than ghosts. He deserves a family that doesn't bury the painful parts. Arthur walks across the room, gently taking his son from her arms, holding the baby close. He will have it, he says. Thanks to you. Maya hesitates. What now? Arthur looks at her, his voice firm. We bring Edward back into this house. We say his name. We honor him. And we start doing what should have been done a long time ago. What about the staff? Maya asks. The judgment, the whispers. They'll learn, Arthur says. Or they'll leave. Maya nods, her lips pressed together. Then she says something that surprises even herself. Let me help you do that, Arthur blinks. You'll stay. Yes, she says. But not just as a caregiver. This is about the truth. A long moment passes. Then Arthur smiles, genuinely wearily, and with something Maya has never seen before. Hope. As the rain begins to fall outside, the nursery becomes more than a room. It becomes a beginning for Bryce, for Edward, for Maya, and for a man trying to rewrite the sins of the past. The next morning, a storm rolls over the mansion, drenching the lawn and shrouding the house in a gray mist. Maya stands at the kitchen counter, stirring oatmeal on the stove. Bryce sits in his high chair, babbling between spoonfuls of mashed bananas, his face a mess of sunshine and mischief. Arthur, newly shaven, walks in holding a folder. We're starting today, he says, his voice full of conviction. Maya looks up. Starting what? Atonement, he replies, placing the folder on the table. A memorial for Edward. Official, public. He will not be forgotten anymore. Maya looks at him for a long time, then slowly nods. It's long overdue. They sit together after breakfast, reviewing Claire's old notes, a few retrieved childhood photos, and a handwritten letter she had once hidden in a book of poetry. In it, Claire wrote, The shame was not in who Edward was. The shame was in our silence. Arthur reads it aloud, his voice breaking on the last line. He clears his throat. We'll place a tombstone, hold a small gathering. Eleanor says she'll speak. Maya gently places her finger on the page. And the pond. We'll restore it, he says. Clean it up, place a proper memorial stone. Claire would have wanted that. As they work, Maya notices something else. Arthur is changing. The sharpness in his demeanor is softening. The rigidity in his posture is relaxing. The guilt has been a corrosive force for years, but now it seems purpose is soothing the cracks. But not everyone is embracing the change. That afternoon, Maya passes Grace in the hallway. The maid stands near the linen closet, her arms crossed, a smug smile on her face. I hear there's going to be a ceremony, Grace says softly. Interesting, I thought dead secrets were buried forever. Maya looks her straight in the eye. Edward deserves to rest in peace. Edward is gone, Grace hisses. But you're not, and some people think you're getting too comfortable. Maya steps closer, her voice low. If you know something, say it. Otherwise, get out of my way. Grace scoffs. You think getting close to that baby makes you untouchable, but you're just a maid with a sad story. Don't forget your place. I haven't forgotten, Maya says calmly. I just don't accept the one you're trying to assign me. Before Grace can respond, a nearby door creaks open. Eleanor steps out of the living room, her eyes landing on both women. Her expression is unreadable, but her words are clear. Grace, she says, her voice a hammer. I think the linens can wait. Go check on the silver in the dining room. Grace hesitates, then walks away in a huff. Eleanor turns to Maya. Don't let the snakes distract you. They hiss loudest when they're afraid. Maya offers a faint smile. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me, Eleanor says. Not until the ceremony is over. Some ghosts don't like to be disturbed. That night, after Bryce is bathed and put to bed, Maya wanders the hallway. The storm has passed, leaving streaks of moonlight on the polished floor. She has Claire's book of poetry tucked under her arm, not sure why, but drawn to a feeling. She stops outside Claire's study door. It is ajar. Inside, the room is dimly lit by a desk lamp. Eleanor is sitting at the desk, flipping through an old ledger. Maya knocks softly. I didn't mean to intrude. Eleanor looks up. Come in. You should see this. Maya walks closer. Eleanor turns the ledger toward her. This time it's not Claire's handwriting. It's the late Mr. Moore's. Sloppy notes, columns of dates, and a page circled in red ink. Maya squints. What am I looking at? Eleanor taps the page. Payments to a private clinic monthly for 7 years after Edward's death. Maya's eyes widen. That doesn't make sense. It does, Eleanor says, her voice grim. If he didn't die. Maya stares at the page. Are you saying Edward could be alive? Eleanor clasps her hands. Or someone was paid to say he wasn't. The revelation hits Maya like a splash of cold water. She looks down at the dice now, always in her jacket pocket. The letters, the hidden grave, the sealed records. It all looks more like a cover-up than a tragedy now. Why would they fake his death? She asks. Shame, Eleanor says, and control. My husband didn't want a stain on the Moore name, but Claire, she might have taken him away, hidden him, kept him safe. That would explain the payments, the secrecy. Maya's hands are trembling. Eleanor says softly, we need to find out where the money went and who cashed those checks. Maya slowly nods. I'll help. Eleanor offers a rare, wistful smile. Good, because the walls in this house are starting to talk, and I think they're talking to you. Later, in the quiet of the room, Maya sits at the writing desk and opens her journal. There is a line between what we remember and what we hide. Today I crossed it. The dead are not always dead, and justice might still find a way. She taps the pen lightly, her breathing steadying. If Edward is out there, someone knows, and I'm going to find them. She closed the journal and whispered into the quiet air, Claire, if you are guiding me, please don't stop. The house creaked in reply. Outside, the wind picked up, and somewhere beneath the veneer of silent years, the truth began to stir, ready to rise. The next morning, the mansion thrummed with a quiet tension. The staff moved more carefully. Whispers curled in the corners like smoke, and the weight of unspoken truths made the air thick. Maya felt it in every room she passed. The walls knew, and they were tired of keeping quiet. In Claire's study, Arthur joined Maya Astarawi and Eleanor just after dawn. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, a sign that he had given up on denial. Eleanor had printed copies of the ledger pages from the night before and laid them on the desk next to a freshly brewed pot of coffee. Arthur scanned the paper, his brow furrowed. Are you sure these payments continued after Edward died? Maya answered for Eleanor. The same amount, the same recipient code, but the bank account led to a small private facility in upstate New York, a place specializing in behavioral rehabilitation and trauma therapy. Arthur sank into the leather armchair. Claire must have taken him there. Eleanor nodded. And your father let her as long as it was kept a secret. Maya pressed on. We need to find out if he is still there, or if he ever was. Arthur stood abruptly. I will call my lawyer quietly if he is alive. Eleanor's voice cut in firm and low. If he is alive, Arthur, you do not get to decide what happens next. Claire chose to protect him. You need to do more than find him. You need to earn him. Arthur didn't argue. His silence was an agreement. That afternoon, while Eleanor made inquiries to the clinic under the pretense of a family history query, Maya pushed Bryce in his stroller around the grounds. The baby giggled, pointing at birds' leaves and passing clouds as if naming the stars. Maya felt a strange sense of peace in her chest. She wasn't sure what they would find, but deep down a voice whispered that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As they reached the edge of the orchard, a voice rang out from behind. You don't belong here. Maya turned to see Grace standing by the gate. Her arms crossed, her eyes cold. You've stirred everything up, Grace continued, digging up graves, turning Arthur against his own blood. Maya instinctively stepped between the stroller and Grace. I'm helping this family heal from something you clearly don't care about. Grace sneered. Healing or replacing? Don't think we don't see it. You with your careful voice and wounded eyes pretending to be a savior, but you're just convenient. Maya's expression didn't change. If the truth makes you uncomfortable, maybe you are on the wrong side of it. Grace stepped closer. You should have stayed in your place. And what place is that? Maya asked softly. The one that doesn't rewrite family history. Just then, Eleanor's voice rang out from behind. Grace, the older woman said sternly. Eleanor walked slowly forward, her cane tapping against the stone. You've said enough. Maya has more dignity in her little finger than you have shown in 30 years. Grace's face contorted, but she said nothing. She turned and stomped back toward the house. Eleanor sighed. The snakes are still slithering. Maya offered a faint smile. At least they are loud enough to hear. That evening, a call came from the clinic. Arthur took it in the living room, his hand shaking slightly. When he returned to Maya and Eleanor, his face was pale, his eyes wide. They confirmed he was admitted under the name Edward Graves, Arthur said. Same birth date, same photo Claire gave them. He was there for 19 years and then, Maya asked. Arthur swallowed. He left 6 years ago voluntarily. There's no forwarding address, but they said he was gentle, kind, and quiet. They kept a journal he wrote. It's locked in storage. They will release it if we go in person. Eleanor sat down heavily. So he could be anywhere. Arthur nodded. Maya stood up. Then we're going to get the journal. The next morning, Arthur and Maya boarded a small chartered plane to New York. Eleanor stayed behind with Bryce, watching from the terrace, her hand on the child's shoulder. As the car disappeared down the driveway, Arthur was quiet for the entire flight. Maya read a book silently, but her mind was filled with questions. Who had Edward become? Did he know he was loved? Did he remember them? The clinic was nestled on a quiet hill surrounded by pine trees and mist. It was rustic, old-fashioned, its brick exterior softened by ivy and time. A nurse named Carol greeted them at the gate. He was our most polite resident, she said warmly. Never raised his voice, spoke softly painted landscapes. She led them to the archives, where an assistant retrieved a small cedar box. Inside was a well-worn journal. The cover was hand-stitched with a simple drawing of a tree. Maya gently opened it. The handwriting inside was slender, slanted, and precise. Today I remembered a song my mother's voice. I don't remember the words, but I remember her laugh when I sang them wrong. She turned to the next page. There was a girl at the pond once. She wore red shoes. She told me not to cry when I fell, that I was brave. Arthur inhaled sharply. That was Claire, he whispered. She always wore red shoes at the pond. Maya flipped to another page. The entries were sparser, more lonely. I wonder if they remember me, or if I am just a ghost in someone else's house. She slowly closed the journal. He's out there, Maya said, her voice filled with certainty. Somewhere. Arthur nodded. And we're going to find him. She looked him in the eye. No, she said, her voice full of authority. We're going to bring him home. The wind was sharper in the countryside. As Arthur and Maya drove through the quiet country roads flanked by red barns and golden autumn fields, the journal lay between them like a third passenger. Each page had peeled away a layer of a person who had been erased, now slowly returning from the silent mist. They returned to the city and, with Eleanor's help, hired a private detective, a quiet, well-dressed man named Reuben Hale, specializing in finding long-lost family members. In the mansion's conservatory, Reuben set down a worn leather briefcase that never left his side. I don't promise miracles, Reuben said. But your brother didn't just vanish. People leave traces, patterns, choices. Maya handed him the journal. Start here. For 2 weeks, the mansion fell into a strange rhythm. Arthur continued to run his business remotely, but the late nights were now filled with long walks and hesitant conversations with Eleanor. Maya took care of Bryce in the nursery and quietly sorted through the remaining pieces of Claire's old storage trunk, searching, always searching. Then, one rainy Thursday morning, the call came. Reuben's voice was calm, but filled with excitement. We found a person. Maya sat up straight on the edge of her seat. Where? Pennsylvania. A man named Eli Garrison lives in a small apartment above a used bookstore. Pays in cash, keeps to himself, teaches children's art classes at the local community center. Arthur, standing nearby, dropped his coffee cup. That's him. No legal records before 2001, Reuben said, but the handwriting matches the journal. 3 days later, Maya and Arthur stood across from the bookstore, Page and Willow, a brick storefront, with ivy climbing the walls. Through the rain-streaked glass, they saw a man arranging paintings behind the counter, tall, thin, with graying temples. He moved with deliberate grace. He wore a sweater with frayed cuffs and sneakers older than Bryce. Arthur's voice cracked. I don't know if I can do this. Maya touched his arm. You have to. They crossed the street. Inside, a bell jingled softly. The man turned. For a moment, nothing passed between them but time. Then Arthur whispered, Edward. The man blinked his bright blue eyes, assessing landed on Arthur's face. I haven't heard that name in decades. Arthur walked forward, trembling. I'm your brother. The man, Edward Eli, whatever he had become, looked stunned. He reached out a hand as if afraid the moment would shatter. I thought you all forgot me. Maya watched the scene, tears welling up behind her eyes. The air shimmered between the two men as something sacred recognition without words. A reunion born out of silence. Arthur said, Claire left me clues. She never stopped loving you. Edward's lips trembled. She saved me, took me away before the doctors did what Father wanted. She found people to hide me, to protect me. I took a new name, lived quietly, safely. Maya stepped forward. She left us a trail, and now she's brought you back. Edward looked at her. You're the person from the journal. She blinked. What? You went to the pond. I saw you there holding my dice. Arthur looked back and forth between them. How? Edward smiled faintly. You think I left and never looked back? No, I came back a few years ago. I stood at the pond. I saw her grave. And then I saw you. You looked like a person who could carry the truth. Maya's hand went to her mouth. Edward continued. But I didn't think you would go this far. Arthur stepped forward again. Will you come home? Edward looked around the small bookstore. I've built a peace here. But your name, Arthur said, deserves to live again. A long silence. Edward slowly nodded. I will come home for Claire and for the boy. Arthur's eyes welled up, and a tear rolled down his cheek. Bryce. Edward's smile deepened. He looks just like her when she was little, the same eyes. Arthur couldn't speak. He simply stepped forward, and the two men embraced 40 years of silence collapsing in one trembling, tearful moment. Back at the mansion, Eleanor stood on the terrace with Maya. Bryce toddled through puddles, giggling. They're on their way home, Maya said. Eleanor closed her eyes. Then this house will be whole again. The car arrived at sunset. Edward stepped out slowly. He was wearing a jacket that was too thin for the cool air, and Maya instinctively went to grab a warmer one from the hall closet. Eleanor met him on the steps. Her voice trembled. You look just like your father did once, but gentler. Edward smiled. And you haven't changed a bit, Mom. They held each other tightly. Arthur came to stand beside Maya as she watched them. You brought back something we didn't know we needed. No, Maya said softly. Claire did that. As night fell and a fire blazed in the great hall, Edward sat with Eleanor and Arthur, with Bryce asleep in Maya's arms. The stories began to emerge, long-buried memories. It was not a perfect reunion, but it was real, and sometimes that was enough. The house, once full of echoing secrets, now whispered with life. Edward's presence created a ripple effect through the rooms. The staff moved more gently. Eleanor smiled more easily, and Arthur seemed less weighed down even in his silence. But Maya knew that peace was never free. It required a reckoning, and the ghosts of the past rarely went quietly. On the second morning after Edward's return, Maya woke early. The sky outside was thick with fog, the kind that blurs the line of truth. As she walked down the grand staircase, she saw Edward already in the library, flipping through an old photo album with trembling hands. He looked up and smiled. I forgot how many faces we used to know. Maya sat across from him. Time buries so much. Edward closed the book. But not everything stays in the ground, does it? Maya tilted her head. Is there something you haven't told me? He hesitated. There's something I overheard years ago, just before Claire took me away. My father, he didn't just want me gone. He wanted everything that connected me to the family to be gone. There were letters Claire wrote to a journalist, a friend she trusted, trying to expose my father for threatening doctors to have me classified as unstable. She was going to go public. Maya's eyes widened. But nothing was ever published. Edward nodded. Because someone stopped it. I believe those letters were intercepted. Who? I don't know. But Claire told me to trust only Eleanor if something were to happen. She said Eleanor knew more than she let on. That morning, Maya found Eleanor on the back patio sipping tea, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Bryce toddled nearby, chasing a wind-blown leaf with pure joy. "Eleanor," Maya began gently, "what do you know about Claire's attempt to go public with the truth?" The older woman didn't flinch. "I warned her against it, said the family would tear itself apart before it admitted to what it had done. Did you help hide her letters?" Eleanor's expression turned severe. "No, but I helped hide her. After your son died, you understood what it was to grieve in silence. Claire had been grieving long before that for the brother they tried to erase." Maya's voice lowered. "Edward thinks someone close stopped her." Eleanor sighed. "Your instincts are right, but be careful. The wickedness in this house isn't just in the past. It's alive." That afternoon, Arthur called a family meeting in the living room. The air was tense. Bryce had been put down for a nap, and the only sound in the room was the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Arthur stood across from Eleanor, Maya, and Edward. "I've decided to amend the family trust," he said. "Edward's name will be restored. His inheritance will be reestablished." Eleanor nodded. Edward looked down. Maya said nothing. Grace, standing by the hall door with a tea tray, paused a second too long. Maya noticed. Arthur continued. "And Maya, should she choose to stay, will be appointed as Bryce's legal guardian in the event of my passing. Legally, finally." A clatter echoed in the room. The tea tray fell to the floor. Grace stood there, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and fury. "I knew it," she hissed. Everyone turned to her. "You brought her here. Let her breastfeed your son, dig up graves, and rewrite history to replace us." Arthur's voice was cold. "Grace, you were never family." "Oh, but I was closer than she will ever be." Grace spat, her voice trembling. "Ask her what she found in the attic. Ask her about the letters." Maya stood up. "You knew." Grace's eyes darted. "Claire used to trust me, and then she started asking too many questions, writing things down. I didn't have a choice." "You destroyed them," Maya said. "No," Grace said slowly. "I hid them." The room held its breath. "Why?" Eleanor asked, her voice almost gentle. Grace's voice cracked. "Because they would have destroyed everything. Do you think this house runs on truth? It runs on silence." Arthur stepped forward. "You're done here. Get out of this house." Grace laughed bitterly. "You can throw me out, but that doesn't change who you or your father were." She turned on her heel and stormed out. The front door slammed shut a few seconds later. Maya turned to Arthur. "We have to find those letters," Edward said, his voice small. She mentioned the attic. That evening, Maya and Edward climbed the narrow servants' stairs to the third-floor attic. The door creaked open, revealing dust-old trunks and the smell of forgotten years. They searched through boxes for over an hour. Then Maya found a loose floorboard behind an armoire. She pried it open. Inside was a small, velvet-wrapped tin box. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The letters, dozens of them, all signed by Claire, written in the final months before she disappeared from public view. She read one aloud to an editor at the Philadelphia Tribune. "I am Claire Moore, and I have evidence that my father tried to have my brother legally declared insane to protect his legacy." Maya's throat tightened. Edward sat next to her, tears streaming down his cheeks. "She fought for me," he whispered, "even when I didn't know." Maya held the letters to her chest. "And now we fight for her." They walked down the attic stairs together, the box of truth held between them. The house was no longer silent. It was finally ready to speak. The sun rose heavily, a deep orange over the Moore mansion, casting long shadows through the study windows. As Maya spread Claire's letters on the oak desk, she worked carefully, her hands gloved. Each envelope was fragile, yet vibrant, an archive of one woman's relentless defiance against silence. Edward stood beside her, his arms crossed, his eyes never leaving the papers. Arthur walked in. "Eleanor said you found them." "We did," Maya replied. "And they're everything Claire tried to say, everything she tried to protect." He walked closer and picked up a letter. His lips were a tight line as he read. "This one details how my father paid a psychiatrist to sign an order to have Edward committed." Edward's face darkened, but he said nothing. "And this one," Maya added, holding up another page, "lists names, doctors' assistants, even a nurse who tried to speak up and was fired days later. Claire was documenting an entire system, not just a single injustice. Arthur sank into a nearby armchair. "So we go public with it?" Edward raised an eyebrow. "Just like that," Arthur nodded. "I have friends in the media who are waiting for a reason to stop pretending my father was an untouchable saint. But what about the family's reputation? What about the company? I'd rather be remembered for righting a wrong," Arthur said, "than die protecting a lie." Maya exchanged a look with Edward. "We'll need help organizing, scanning, authenticating, cross-referencing." "I already called Reuben," Arthur replied. "He'll be here within the hour." As the day progressed, the mansion transformed into a command center. The dining room became a war room with charts, notes, and photos. Reuben arrived with a laptop and a portable scanner, quickly setting up a workflow with Maya. Edward took frequent breaks, pacing near the windows or walking the grounds as if reconnecting with the land he once belonged to. By evening, Maya had compiled the majority of Claire's archive into a digital folder. Reuben reviewed them silently. "This," he finally said, "is more than a personal story. It's systemic, and you're sitting on a historical record. But be ready. When this goes public, people will come for blood." Arthur watched from the bar, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. "Let them. We have the truth." Reuben nodded. "Then you need a journalistic partner who will handle this with care." "I know a person," Maya said. "The one Claire trusted." 2 days later, they met Camille Price, an investigative journalist for the Philadelphia Chronicle. She was a tall, composed woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a compassionate demeanor. She arrived at the mansion and was ushered into a private meeting in the library. Camille listened to Maya's summary, then reviewed the scanned letters and records. After an hour, she slowly closed her laptop. "This is huge," Camille said, "and heartbreaking. You're not just exposing a personal injustice, but the silence of an entire generation." Edward sat on the edge of his seat, tense. "So, you'll do it?" Camille nodded. "But it has to be your voices. I can write, but the world needs to hear from the people who lived through it." Arthur agreed. "We'll provide the statements and the documents. You do the rest." That night, Maya returned to her room, exhausted. Bryce slept peacefully in his crib nearby, his breathing like gentle waves. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened her journal, her pen hovering over the page. She wrote, "Claire, we found your voice and we will make sure the whole world hears it." A knock on the door startled her. It was Eleanor. "May I come in?" the older woman asked, stepping in with a tea tray. Maya smiled. "Of course." Eleanor poured 2 cups of tea and sat down. "You know you brought this house back to life." "I didn't do it alone," Maya said. "No," Eleanor agreed. "But you're the one who refused to let it stay silent." Maya looked toward Bryce. "Sometimes the truth is louder than we think. We just need to give it breath." Eleanor raised her teacup. "To that breath and to the voices that rise." By the end of the week, Camille's article was ready, titled, "The Forgotten Son." A woman who challenged a dynasty to save her brother. Just the preview went viral. Major news networks called. Advocacy groups reached out. Former hospital staff sent in their own testimonies. The Moore legacy shattered. Arthur got a call from the company's board of directors. Investors demanded an explanation, but instead of backing down, he issued a press statement acknowledging the story and committing a portion of the company's profits to mental health justice initiatives. At the press conference, Arthur stood beside Edward, Maya, and Camille. "I cannot change the past," Arthur said into the microphone, "but I can shed light on it. Claire Moore was not just my sister. She was a protector, a truth-teller, and it is her legacy we will honor from now on." Reporters' cameras flashed. Edward said nothing, but he held his head high. Maya stood beside them, calm, resolute. Claire's voice had finally found its space, and the world was listening. Well done. The courthouse was buzzing with a nervous, contained energy. Outside, protesters gathered behind barricades, holding signs that read, "Justice for Edward," and "No more silence." Media vans lined the block, their antennas raised like flags in a storm. Inside, the marble corridors echoed with footsteps and whispers as people filed into the courtroom. Maya stood with Edward in the hallway, helping him straighten his tie. He hadn't worn one in years. But today was not a day for comfort. Today was a day for confrontation. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Edward nodded, but his hand trembled. "I didn't think I'd live to see this moment. I thought I would die a ghost." "Not anymore," Maya said. "Today you are heard." Arthur approached in a navy suit, his face grim, unreadable. "Our lawyer is inside. We are not suing the hospital for money. We are suing to force them to unseal the records and issue a public apology. It's what Claire would have wanted." Edward nodded again, his eyes welling up with tears. As the bailiff called for the session to begin, Maya squeezed Edward's hand. "Let's finish what Claire started." The courtroom was a sea of suits, microphones, and sharp glances. The Moore legal team sat on one side of the table. Across from them, the hospital's lawyers and administration fidgeted. At the front, Judge Avery Carr, a stern woman in her 60s, known for her zero tolerance for corruption, adjusted her glasses and rapped her gavel. "Let the record show," she began. "This is not a trial for money, but for memory, for justice delayed. Let's proceed." Arthur was the first to speak, taking the stand with a dignified composure. "My father, Edward Moore Sr., used his power and privilege to silence a truth that shamed him," he said. "He manipulated a system, people, and policies to erase his own son. This is not speculation. We have letters, testimonies, and signatures proving a coordinated effort to label Edward as mentally unstable without cause." A murmur went through the courtroom. The judge held up a hand for order, and Arthur continued. "We are not seeking revenge. We are seeking public acknowledgement. The world deserves to know the truth." Next, Maya testified. Maya then testified. She spoke of finding the journal unearthing Claire's letters and piecing together a life that had been unjustly hidden. Her voice was steady, her words clear. "I am not a member of this family by blood," she said, "but I have come to love Bryce as if he were my own son, and I have seen what silence does to a family. Claire did not just fight for Edward. She fought for all the people the system tried to erase." Judge Carr leaned forward. "And you believe this system is still at play?" "Yes," Maya said. "Because Edward is not the only one. He is just the one who was lucky enough to have someone keep a record." The final testimony came from Edward himself. He rose with the help of a cane, not out of weakness, but to steady himself against the weight of his memories. "My name was stolen," he began. "I was told I didn't belong, that I didn't matter, that I was defective, but none of it was true. My sister saved me, and now my family is here not to fix what was broken, but to make sure it never happens again." He paused, his voice cracking. "I forgive them, but I will not let them forget." The room fell silent. After a tense recess, Judge Carr returned with her verdict. "Based on the evidence and testimony presented, I order the complete unsealing of the hospital's records concerning the wrongful confinement of Edward Moore. Furthermore, I order the facility to issue a formal public apology within 30 days, and to contribute to a new fund to be named the Claire Moore Fund for Mental Health Advocacy and Ethical Medical Practices." Applause erupted in the courtroom before the gavel brought silence. Edward sank back into his chair, tears streaming down his cheeks. Maya squeezed his shoulder. Arthur exhaled a long breath as if he had been holding it for years. They had done it. They had told the truth, and the world had listened. Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers as the Moore family emerged. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Arthur stepped up to the podium. "We are not here as victims," he declared, "but as witnesses to the power of truth. My sister Claire was silenced. Today we speak not just for her, but for every family who has lost someone to a lie cloaked in power." He gestured toward Edward. "This is my brother, and I am proud to say his name." Edward stepped up, hesitant at first, but the roar of applause gave him strength. "Thank you," he said simply. Then, hand in hand, they walked away from the courthouse into a world that finally knew their story. That night at the mansion, the family gathered in the living room. The fireplace crackled softly. Bryce, now almost 2, toddled from person to person, unaware that history had been rewritten that day. Eleanor raised a glass. "To Claire," she said, "the woman who saw the truth even when the world called her crazy." "To Claire," they all echoed. Edward took Maya's hand. "None of this would have happened without you." Maya shook her head. It was never about me. I just followed the light she left behind. Arthur turned to them both. And now it is our job to keep that light burning. In the quiet that followed, the family sat together, not just restored, but reinvented. The wounds would never fully disappear, but they were no longer hidden. They were named face-stoned, and in that truth, they found peace. In the weeks following the court victory, the Moore mansion became a symbol not of money or personal power, but of redemption. The reporters slowly faded away. The buzz around the case began to die down. But within its walls, another story was unfolding, one that couldn't be captured in headlines or press releases. Maya woke before dawn, unable to sleep. The house, though quiet, still hummed with a current of change. In the nursery, Bryce stirred in his sleep, mumbling nonsense to the dark. She gently touched his cheek and pulled the blanket closer. He had no idea what had been traded for his future, and perhaps that was the greatest gift of all. Downstairs in the library, Edward sat alone, looking out the window. The early morning fog hung low over the grounds. "Early," Maya said, walking in with 2 cups of tea. Edward offered a faint smile. "Couldn't sleep. Feels like my mind is trying to process 30 years of silence all at once." She handed him a cup. "You don't have to do it alone anymore." He looked at her, looked. That's the part I keep forgetting. For so long, isolation was my default state. Even now, it's hard to believe I'm allowed to belong. "You always belonged here, Edward. They just took away the map." He gave a dry, hollow laugh. "Poetic and painful, yes." They sipped their tea in silence, until Arthur walked in still in his pajamas and a robe. He looked lighter, as if shedding the family secret had lifted a generational weight. "Morning," he said. "The Chronicle's editorial board called. They want to run a follow-up interview." Edward raised an eyebrow again. "Didn't they already do a 2-part expose?" Arthur shrugged. "The public never seems to tire of a good redemption story, I suppose. But this time, they want you and Maya." Maya started. "Me?" "They think your perspective, an outsider who became this family's moral compass, adds something powerful. And they're not wrong." Edward hesitated. "Do you want to—" Maya looked out the window. "I didn't come here for attention, but if our story helps someone else speak up, then yes, I will." Arthur nodded. "Then it's settled." That afternoon, Maya and Edward sat in the same study where they had unearthed Claire's letters just weeks before. A journalist named Iris Chen, with a soft but sharp voice, set down her recorder and offered a reassuring smile. "I know you've been through a whirlwind," she said. "This isn't to rehash the lawsuit. I want to understand what comes next. The healing, the legacy, the family." Maya relaxed slightly. Edward clasped his hands in his lap. "Let's start with you, Edward," Iris said. "How has life been since the verdict?" He thought for a moment. "Liberating but strange. I spent most of my life trying to be invisible. Now I'm being asked to exist in plain sight. It's like learning to breathe again." "And you, Maya," Iris turned to her. "I came here to care for a child," Maya said. "I didn't expect to uncover a ghost, but I now realize Claire wasn't haunting this house. She was waiting for someone to finish what she started." "Do you see yourself staying here?" Maya slowly nodded. "This place, it's not perfect, but it's changed. The people have changed. Bryce deserves to grow up in a home that knows how to tell the truth." Iris leaned in. "And you believe justice has been served?" Edward spoke before Maya could answer. "Justice isn't a destination, it's a decision. You choose it every day, by speaking the truth even when it's hard, especially then." Iris smiled, turning off her recorder. "That's the quote." That evening, as the house settled into its quiet rhythm, Maya stood on the back patio watching the sunset. The horizon was a riot of orange and gold silhouetting the old trees. Bryce toddled on the grass chasing a butterfly. Arthur watched from an armchair and Eleanor prepared lemonade inside. Edward joined Maya, his hands in his pockets. "I was thinking," he said, "what if we opened a portion of the mansion to the public as a memorial to Claire for people like her?" Maya blinked, surprised. "You would share this place?" He nodded. "Not the whole thing, just the west wing and the gardens. Establish an archive, a resource center where people can learn, remember, and fight." She smiled. "That's beautiful and brave." He gave a soft laugh. You're the brave one. I'm just catching up. They stood in silence as the sun dipped lower. Suddenly, Bryce tripped on the grass. Maya started to run to him, but before she could, he sat up, looked around unflustered, and clapped when a sparrow landed nearby. Edward chuckled. That boy has steel in his bones. He's going to need it, Maya said softly. The world hasn't stopped changing. That night, Maya returned to her room and took out Claire's final letter, the one she hadn't shown anyone. It wasn't addressed to a newspaper or a friend, but to the person who finds this. She opened the page, her hands trembling slightly. If you are reading this, it means the truth did not die with me. Thank you for believing in it, for carrying it forward. If you are suffering, I hope my words help you find the light. If you are privileged, I hope they make you listen. And if you are lost, I hope they lead you home. Maya closed her eyes, pressing the paper to her chest. I found you, Claire, she whispered, and I won't let you be forgotten. In the distance, an owl hooted. The night was deep, and within the walls of the Moore mansion, the legacy of silence was finally and completely broken. The first frost of autumn dusted the gardens with silver threads. Leaves rustled underfoot as Maya walked the gravel path that wound through the west yard, soon to be the Claire Moore Memorial Garden. The name was decided at a family meeting last week, but it didn't feel real until the morning light streamed through the newly installed iron archway at the garden's entrance. Etched into the iron were Claire's initials, CM. Maya knelt by a row of still blooming roses, checking the soil and gently brushing away fallen leaves. The garden had become her morning ritual, a quiet place for reflection, a place where her own heartbeat could find its rhythm. Claire had loved flowers. In her letters, Claire had written about walks in the garden and the peace they brought her during the years she quietly watched over Edward. Now those flowers stood as symbols of resilience. From behind, a slow set of footsteps approached. Maya didn't need to look up. She would have loved this place, Edward said, his voice warm with memory. She would have insisted on marigolds, Maya replied with a soft smile. I found a note about them in her journal, called them plantable sunshine. Edward knelt beside her. We'll plant them tomorrow, right in the center. They worked in silence for a few minutes, arranging the floral markers and smoothing the soil. Then Edward spoke again, this time with a hesitant tone. I'm thinking of writing a book. Maya paused, brushing dirt from her gloves. About Claire, about everything, her story, mine, ours. He glanced at her. I don't want people to remember us through a second-hand article. I want to give her the dignity of truth in our own way. I think that's a beautiful idea, Maya said. But only when you're ready. I'm terrified, he admitted. But perhaps that's why I need to do it. She gently touched his arm. Then I'll help you every step of the way. That afternoon, the Moore Mansion hosted its first planning meeting for the opening of the Claire Moore Memorial Garden. Local community leaders, activists, and educators were invited alongside historians and representatives from mental health organizations. The room buzzed with a quiet anticipation as Arthur stood at the front. We're here not to memorialize a tragedy, he began, but to honor a legacy of truth. My sister gave us a mirror. It's time we look into it. He gestured to a board where preliminary designs for the memorial were displayed, engraved quotes. A timeline board, a small library wing attached to the garden's entrance. We're also establishing a fund, he continued, for those who seek mental health justice, and we want this space to be open to dialogue, lectures, storytelling, and healing. Maya stepped up, holding a clipboard. Claire's voice will be the foundation, but we also want the community's voice here. This place belongs to everyone who has ever been silenced. After the meeting, as the guests mingled, an older woman approached Maya. She had silver hair in a neat bun and a cane that tapped softly on the floor. You're the one who found the letters, she said, her eyes welling up. I knew Claire years ago. She was brilliant, but you could see the weight in her eyes. Maya nodded. She carried too much alone. I'm glad she's not alone now, the woman whispered. Thank you. In the weeks that followed, construction crews began to reshape the West Garden. Workers cleared a space for benches, pathways, and the small archive building with its glass facade. Maya often supervised, bundled in a coat and scarf, with Bryce toddling beside her. Edward converted the old sunroom into an office, spending hours transcribing memories, rewriting Claire's journal, and consulting Maya on tone, rhythm, and truth. One afternoon, Maya found him asleep at his desk. She didn't wake him, just draped a blanket over his shoulders and sat nearby rereading one of Claire's letters for the 100th time. It still moved her, still pained her, still healed her. Then, a letter arrived for Maya, hand-delivered by a lawyer. It bore the seal of an estate administrator. Maya opened it carefully, her hands trembling. It was Claire's will. Unbeknownst to anyone, Claire had legally changed her will just before her death. In it, she named Maya as the keeper of her legacy. The words were simple but clear. To Maya Williams, the woman I never met but always hoped for, I entrust the story I could not tell. I trust you to carry it with grace and to protect what I could not. You are and always will be family. Maya sat stunned, the paper blurring as tears welled in her eyes. She held it to her chest and whispered, "I won't let you down, Claire. I promise." She showed the letter to Arthur and Edward that evening. They read it in silence, visibly moved. "She knew," Arthur finally said. "Even before we knew." Edward placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "Then it's only right that the first room in the archive is named after you." "No," Maya said firmly. "Name it for her, but put a plaque underneath. Something simple, something she would have understood." They thought for a long moment before Arthur whispered, "What about this, for the one who listened?" Maya nodded, smiling through her tears. "Perfect." And as autumn deepened around the Moore mansion, as the first marigolds began to bloom in the center of the garden, something else blossomed. Healing, yes, but also a sense of permanence. The kind that only truth can stitch back together and only love can cultivate. It started with a creak. Maya had walked through the Moore mansion for over a year now, but this sound, subtle and strange, was new. She paused at the top of the narrow servants' staircase in the east wing, where late afternoon light filtered through a hazy window. Bryce was down for his nap. Eleanor was at her book club. Edward was in his writing nook. She took a step back. There it was again, a low groan beneath the floorboards. Not the usual settling of an old house, but something deliberate, isolated. Maya knelt, pressing her ear to the floorboard. Faintly, the sound repeated 3 distinct taps, spaced like a forgotten memory, tapping at the edge of consciousness. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Maya returned with a flashlight and a screwdriver. She carefully pried at the corner of the board where the sound had come from. Dust puffed up. The flashlight beam caught something metallic. She reached down and pulled out a small tin box, its rusted lid stuck fast. She hesitated, then forced it open. Inside were newspaper clippings, a few photos, and a bundle of letters, this time in a man's handwriting. Edward's, but not the Edward she knew. The writing was dated, the tone youthful, heartbreaking in its desperation. Maya sat on the stairs reading by the flashlight's beam. Letter after letter written in secret, never sent. To Claire. Apologies, please, descriptions of his loneliness, the fog of the medication, the dreams of the garden, the house of her, and one that was different. The paper was yellower, the writing shaky. It read, "If anything happens to me, know this, I remember. I always remember. They said I was broken, but I'm not. I am scared, and I am silent because I think I have to be. But I remember the night they took me. The man in the suit, the nurse with the red lipstick, the lie they called treatment. I remember Claire. I remember you trying to stop them." The letter was unsigned. Maya's heart pounded. He hadn't been completely silenced. A part of him had fought back, left a trace, a fingerprint, in the dust of history. The next morning, Maya showed the letters to Edward. He read them with trembling hands. "I must have written them before the medication stole months of my memory," he whispered. "I think a part of you was trying to fight back," Maya said. "And this is the proof." They sat in silence, the tin box between them like a time capsule. Arthur arrived a moment later, reading in quiet disbelief. "We can use this," he finally said, "in the memorial as a final chapter, a symbol of resistance, even in captivity." Edward nodded. "Call it the whispers, because that's what they were. The whispers of a truth that refused to die in the noise of lies." As winter approached, the final preparations for the opening of the Claire Moore Memorial Garden were underway. The garden, now golden with dry marigolds and winding ivy, felt peaceful yet resolute. The archive was complete glass walls, warm interiors, and exhibits that blended digital storytelling with personal artifacts. Maya curated the final exhibit, The Whispers. It stood alone in the end corridor, a recreation of the tin box, the letters encased in glass, with Edward's voice playing from a speaker reading excerpts of his own youthful pleas. Visitors would leave the exhibit in silence. Arthur took charge of the press campaign for the memorial. The story had shifted from family drama to a national conversation about institutional silence, about who gets to be believed and who gets buried under procedure. An op-ed co-written by Arthur and Maya appeared in the New York Times. The title was Simple Claire's Garden. The opening day was cold and clear. Guests arrived from across the country, scholars, survivors, advocates. Some had never met Claire, never heard of the Moore family, but felt the echo of her pain in their own lives. Maya stood at the entrance holding Bryce's hand, wearing a navy coat with Claire's brooch pinned to the lapel. Eleanor stood nearby, dignified and quiet, her eyes scanning the crowd for ghosts and finding only peace. Edward took the microphone on the stone stage in the garden. He looked thinner but clearer, like a person who had finally stepped fully into the light. "My sister was not perfect," he began. "She was angry, brilliant, and unapologetically loud when it mattered most, and for that they tried to silence her." He paused, looking at the crowd. "They failed." A soft round of applause, restrained but profound, rippled through the audience. Edward continued, "This garden is not just for her. It's for everyone who was ever told they were too much, too broken, too loud. It's a place for the whispers that refuse to die." He stepped back. Then Maya walked forward, Bryce in her arms. "This boy will grow up knowing the truth of his family. Not the polished version, but the raw, messy, painful one. Because that is where true love exists, in honesty." She looked up at the sky, where a flock of birds sliced through the winter clouds. "And today we choose to speak a truth that is loud enough to be heard." A gentle chime sounded as the gates opened. Visitors streamed in, walking past the plaques, the flowers, the letters, the names. Some cried, some prayed, some just stood still, absorbing the weight of a history reclaimed. In the middle of the garden, under the largest tree, a new plaque was placed. It read, "Claire Moore. She was not silenced. She was silenced." And right below in smaller font, "And she still spoke." Maya stood there long after the others had left. Bryce reached out a hand to touch a flower. She knelt, letting him feel the petals. "Look," she whispered. "This is what truth looks like." The boy smiled, then giggled, and somewhere deep in the marrow of the garden, the whispers became a song. The memorial had been open for 2 weeks when the first anonymous envelope arrived. No return address, no stamp, just a cream-colored envelope with Maya's name written in elegant, old-fashioned script. At first she thought it was a thank-you note, but when she opened it, her breath caught. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Claire young and radiant, standing next to a man Maya didn't recognize. He was well-dressed, tall, with a sharp, hawkish face. On the back of the photo was a single line of hurried writing. "You don't know the whole story. Go to where she first screamed." Maya slowly sat down on a bench in the library, her heart pounding. She flipped the photo over, studying the strange man. He was hauntingly familiar. She reread the cryptic line where she first screamed. Maya didn't tell anyone right away. There was something about this note that felt deeply personal, directed at her. If it was a threat, it was a subtle one. If it was a warning, it was urgent. Either way, Maya needed answers before she involved anyone else. That night, after putting Bryce to bed and making sure the house was quiet, Maya returned to the old blueprints of the mansion in the archive. She scrutinized them, tracing her fingers over a map of the East Wing, an area that had been sealed off for years. There, nestled between the original nursery and the servants' staircase, was a room marked "Storage Converted 1961. She stared at the date, the same year Claire was committed. Maya found an old key ring in an archive drawer and slipped into the sealed east hallway. The corridor was colder than the rest of the house, as if the air hadn't moved in decades. Dust clung to the corners like memory. She fit a key into the lock. The door groaned open. The room was small, almost claustrophobic. A broken chair lay in the corner, and the wallpaper was torn in long, angry scratches. On the floor was a faded lavender ribbon knotted with age. Suddenly, the air shifted. Maya turned. A figure stood in the doorway. An old man, tall with a hawkish face. The man from the photograph. Her breath caught. "I see you found the room," he said. His voice was low, raspy. She called it the box. Fitting, wasn't it? Who are you? Maya asked, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. He stepped forward, his eyes hidden under the brim of a worn hat. My name is Richard Vance. I worked for the family long before everything fell apart. You were in the photo with Claire. He nodded. She used to trust me, thought I could help, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. He moved slowly, sitting down on the broken chair. The wood creaked beneath him like a confession. I was there the night they took her, he said. Watched from the hallway as they dragged her out. They said she was hysterical. Said she needed help, but I knew the truth. She wasn't crazy. She was angry, rightfully so. Why didn't you stop them? Maya asked. Richard looked down. Because I was a coward and because they paid me to be silent. A long silence stretched between them. I didn't come for forgiveness, he continued. I came because you've stirred something up. The memorial, the truth. It's not finished. What do you mean? There's another file, one no one knows about, locked away in the archives of St. Augustine Hospital where they took her. It contains a doctor's notes, medication schedules, and a report written by a nurse who had her doubts. She vanished not long after. Maya's back stiffened. And you're only telling me now. I've carried it for years. Guilt ages you. I wasn't strong enough to face it. But seeing what you've done, what you've built, I knew someone had to take the final piece. He took a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. It was a photocopy, an address, a reference number with a timestamp. This is all I have. Maya took it silently, her eyes scanning the page. If you go, Richard said, standing up, be careful. Not everyone has forgotten Claire Moore, and not everyone is happy her story is being told. He turned and disappeared down the hall before she could ask another question. Maya stood alone in the room, the photograph still in her hand, dust motes swirling in the moonlight. The next morning, Maya called Edward and Arthur into the study. She laid out the photograph, the letter, and Richard's note. Edward stared at the photograph. The man I saw him once years ago lurking outside my father's funeral. Arthur's jaw tightened. If this file exists, we need to find it before someone else tries to bury it. I'll go, Maya said. I want to see it for myself. You're not going alone, Edward said with conviction. Arthur nodded. We'll make a plan, quietly, legally, without a fuss. Maya looked down at the ribbon she'd taken from the floor the night before, the soft lavender between her fingers. Claire's voice echoed in her memory. Don't let them forget me. She wouldn't. She couldn't, because now it wasn't just a garden that was at stake. It was a truth buried deep, and Maya Williams wasn't afraid to dig. The morning was gray as Maya and Edward arrived in the rural outskirts of Westbridge, Massachusetts, where St. Augustine Hospital stood like a forgotten monument to pain. The building was a sprawl of red brick and weathered stone, part abandoned, part repurposed as the state's mental health archives. It smelled of mildew and time, the kind of place where history tries to erase itself by burying itself in bureaucracy. Maya clutched the referral document. Richard had given her an old medical ID and a citation code. She had called ahead and arranged a private research appointment as a journalist, skipping the entire backstory. Edward, posing as a legal assistant, carried a briefcase with backup papers in case they needed to cite public records access laws. A woman in her 60s greeted them at the reception desk. Her name tag read, Carol. You're here for the Moore file? She asked softly, as if the name still carried weight. Yes, Maya replied. Claire Moore. We were told there might be personal notes in the restricted collection. Carol hesitated. Her eyes flickered up to the overhead security camera, then to Maya's expression. Something in that look, both fiery and calm, moved her. Follow me, she said, standing up. She led them down a long hallway lined with rusted file cabinets. At the end was a locked room with a reinforced door. Carol punched in a code, swiped a keycard, and ushered them inside. Rows of patient files stretched through the room, boxed and labeled with numbers instead of names. She pointed to a desk. I'll give you 30 minutes. Copy quietly. If anyone asks, I didn't show you the nurse's journal. With that, she left. Maya and Edward exchanged a look. Nurse's journal, he whispered. They searched quickly, following the old ID code, until they found the box. It was heavier than expected, filled with handwritten notes, typed reports, and a few faded, haunting black and white photos. Maya flipped through the reports, each page more damning than the last. Claire's medication was 3 times the standard dose. There were notes about her uncooperative behavior, her refusal to be silent, her insistence that her brother's condition was induced, not natural. Then Maya found it, a thin, leather-bound journal tucked between the folders. She opened it. The first page was dated July 1st, 1961. The handwriting belonged to a woman named Elaine Thatcher. July 30, 1961. I was assigned to Miss Claire Moore. She arrived last night heavily sedated. She keeps saying she was forced here, that her family betrayed her. I want to believe she's delusional, but something in her eyes unsettles me. She's not broken. She's angry. Page after page documented Claire's deteriorating health, not from illness, but from an overdose of medication and isolation. Thatcher questioned the orders of the attending physician, Ronald Avery, but was silenced. She wrote about threats that she was being watched. Then abruptly, the journal stopped. The final entry, dated September 9th, 1961, read, "If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident. Claire is not insane. She is a witness, and someone does not want her to speak." Edward squeezed his hand. "This is it. This is the proof." Maya photographed every page, carefully documenting even the marginal notes. She knew this wasn't just evidence. It was a lifeline, a bridge from Claire's silence to her legacy. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. They froze. Voices. 2 unfamiliar men. Edward quickly closed the box while Maya hid the journal in her jacket. The door opened. A tall man in a gray suit walked in, followed by a young assistant holding a clipboard. The older man's name tag read, Dr. Avery III. "Yes," he asked sharply, his eyes sweeping the room. "I was informed someone was viewing restricted files." "We are with the Claire Moore Memorial Fund," Edward replied smoothly, pulling out a document. "Under Massachusetts law." Chapter 66. Section 10. We have the right to access the medical records of the deceased with direct family representation. Dr. Avery's eyes narrowed. What a coincidence that my grandfather was the head physician here in 1962. Coincidence, Maya said evenly, is a gentle word for legacy. His smile was strained. "I hope you are not implying anything untoward." "I'm not implying," she replied. "I'm documenting." Dr. Avery's face twitched, but he stepped back. "Your time is up. Please leave the materials on the desk." "We're finished," Edward said, placing an irrelevant folder down. "Thank you for your hospitality." They walked out without another word. Only when they were in the car did Maya release the breath she had been holding. "Did you see his face when I said documenting?" she said, grinning. "I wasn't documenting, but he didn't know that." Edward laughed. "You have more fire than a courtroom prosecutor." Back at the mansion, they uploaded everything to a secure drive and shared it with Arthur, who sat in silent shock as he read. This, he finally whispered, changes everything. They began drafting a public statement carefully legally. The plan was to release the journal in conjunction with a special exhibit in the memorial, The Locked Wing. That night, Maya stood at the entrance to Claire's garden, looking at the stars. The ribbon was still in her jacket pocket, the whispers now an undeniable voice. She thought of Elaine Thatcher, of the courage it took to write what she wrote, to risk everything for the truth. And she knew for certain that silence would never win in this house again. The night before the new exhibit's launch, protesters appeared at the gate. Maya was in the conservatory with Bryce when a call came from the reception desk. "There's a group of about 20 people here. Signs, chants, nothing violent yet." She handed Bryce off to Eleanor, who nodded wordlessly and hurried out. Outside the memorial gates was a group of older men and women, many in suits. A man at the front held a sign that read, "Let the dead rest. No more slander." Maya recognized him from a newspaper clipping, Councilman Daniel Gresham, the grandson of a former St. Augustine board member. They had anticipated a backlash. But not this soon. Miss Williams Gresham called out as she approached. "You're the mastermind behind this latest sensational display?" "If you call the truth a display," Maya said, "then yes. You have no idea what legacy you're meddling with. A good name, generations of work to heal the mentally ill, slandered for what a headline. No," Maya said, her voice steady. "For justice. For a woman who was silenced. For a nurse who vanished for speaking up. for people who were locked away for being inconvenient. Someone in the crowd yelled, "Shame!" Maya didn't flinch. She stepped closer to the gate. "You don't have to agree with the exhibit, but the truth is now public, and no protest, no councilman's badge can rewrite history." Gresham's eyes narrowed. "This isn't the last we'll see of each other." "I hope so," Maya said, "because next time I'll have a microphone." The diary of Nurse Elaine Thatcher ended abruptly on September 9th, 1961, with the haunting line, "If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident. Claire is not insane. She is a witness, and someone does not want her to speak." Edward clenched his hand. "This is it. This is the proof." Maya carefully photographed every page, every note. She knew this was more than just evidence. It was a lifeline from Claire's silence to her legacy. As Edward and Maya prepared to leave Dr. Avery III, the grandson of the former head physician unexpectedly appeared. He questioned them sharply. Edward, with his prepared documents, responded fluently, citing the law to protect their right to access the records. Maya, with a calm but powerful demeanor, said, "I'm not implying. I'm documenting." This statement made Dr. Avery's face twitch. They left successfully carrying the crucial evidence with them. Back at the mansion, they shared everything with Arthur, who was stunned as he read. "This," he whispered, "changes everything." They began planning to release the diary and a new exhibit titled "The Locked Wing" at the memorial. That night, Maya stood at the entrance to Claire's garden looking at the stars. The faint purple ribbon was still in her jacket pocket, and the whispers of the past had now become an undeniable voice. The night before the new exhibit's launch, a group of protesters appeared at the mansion's gate. Maya went out to confront them, including Councilman Daniel Gresham, the grandson of a former St. Augustine Hospital board member. Gresham accused Maya of slandering the legacy of the deceased for sensational purposes. Maya replied with a steady voice, "No, for justice, for a woman who was silenced, for a nurse who vanished for speaking up, for people who were locked away for being inconvenient." She stepped closer, speaking directly to them. "You don't have to agree with the exhibit, but the truth is now public, and no protest can rewrite history." Gresham's eyes darted with anger. "This isn't the last we'll see of each other." "I hope so," Maya said, "because next time I'll have a microphone." "Front page," he said. The large headline read, "The Sanitarium Truth Family's Legacy Sparks Mental Health Transparency Movement." Below was a photo of Maya standing next to the locked wing exhibit, her hand resting gently on the glass case that held Elaine's final letter. The article detailed the memorial's impact. Families had started reaching out, their long-silent stories now brought to light. Lawmakers were beginning to push for access to decades-old sealed records from treatment facilities. Claire's name was no longer a footnote in a family's tragic history. She had become a symbol. Maya folded the newspaper. That afternoon, an unannounced visitor arrived. He was a middle-aged man with stormy gray eyes, Thomas Avery, the grandson of Dr. Ronald Avery. "I've come to say something," he said, "and to listen." They sat in the study. Thomas Avery confessed, "My grandfather was not a good man. He was meticulous, obsessed with order over truth." He explained that his grandfather knew Claire was not ill, but was simply a threat to the family's secrets. Thomas produced an envelope. "I don't want to carry this silence anymore. This belongs here." Maya took it silently. Inside was a letter that had never been sent, a confession of sorts from Ronald Avery, detailing how Claire's diagnosis was manipulated, the pressure from powerful family members, the payments, the threats. That evening, Maya gave it to Edward. "We'll add it to the archive," he said. "Let it rest beside Elaine's words, so they can speak together." The weeks passed peacefully. Visitors continued to arrive, bringing letters, photos, and mementos of loved ones who had been silenced and forgotten. A woman wept in front of a sculpture, whispering, "My mother was here too. She never came back." An old man in a veteran's jacket left a folded flag at the garden gate. And a young nurse placed a stethoscope under the plaque bearing Claire's name. "I want to remember how to listen," she told Maya. On the last night of the year, Maya stood in the garden again. Snow crunched under her feet. Arthur walked up, his breath visible in the cold air. "She changed everything," he said. "No," Maya replied. "She planted the seeds. We just watered them." Arthur turned to her. I want to start a scholarship for women like Elaine, for nurses who dare to speak up. Maya nodded. And I'll help build it in Claire's name. As the clock struck midnight, fireworks bloomed in the distance. Maya knelt brushing snow from a stone in the garden. Claire's name was carved on it, simple and strong. Rest well, she whispered. You'll never be forgotten. Inside, Bryce ran through the hall, his laughter spreading like light.